I sort of went over this last time a little bit, but this is where it becomes important as far as looking at the layers and things like that. Like, I'm not expecting you guys to make a puppet from scratch. Again, we just don't have the time for that in this class. We could do a whole class on just character animation if we wanted to. So what you do need to do, though, is just make sure you get a puppet that's got the right stuff in it. So when you download a puppet, the most important stuff, we'll see here in a minute, the most important stuff is in the head and the mouth section here. Okay, these are the two things, especially these phonemes. Remember I talked about these phonemes last week where we've got the different mouth movements and the different states of movements for the mouths. This is by far the most important part of a puppet, is all these different mouth movements and facial movements, the mouth movements and the eye components, okay? The right eye and the left eye. If you notice, the mouth has a bunch of phonemes in it. There's all these different phoneme states. And you can get by without all these. I mean, you could really just get by with a puppet with 2 or 3 states for the face, and import it, and Character Animator will do its best to automatically recognize that, but it won't work great, okay? The eyes themselves usually have a couple different components. You have the eyebrows. You've got a blink factor on the eye. You've got one layer that's a blink. You've got a layer that's a pupil, okay? And then you've got the background of the pupil itself, like the iris, and then you've got eyelashes and stuff like that. So generally in an eye, you'll have those components. You'll have a blink cycle of some kind. You'll have a pupil cycle, a pupillary range, which is just, again, the iris, the background of that pupil, and then whatever else kind of look and feel wise you wanted on this thing. Now, just to kind of show you some stuff here, I'm going to customize this puppet a little bit. I'm going to do, since this is all you got to do, just to kind of show you the process if you wanted a more custom puppet, I'm just going to go onto my desktop here, and I'm going to throw in a picture of this skeleton. I'm actually going to drop this into a new Photoshop window, this little skeleton. I'm going to do something real quick here. I'm just going to cut one of this skeleton's legs off. And I'm going to add this skeleton leg. I'm going to replace the leg on this Vicky puppet with this skeleton leg, just to show you that you can, again, you don't have to stick with a puppet if you've downloaded it off the internet. You can always replace these pieces really easily, okay? So what I'm going to do is I just copied a leg off of this skeleton PNG. It's just a PNG I downloaded off the internet, okay? I just copied this in here. And I'm just going to go to my body section down here. Notice there is a body section. Now, the body is just the torso, the arms and legs all in one piece, and the arms separate. Okay, so something that's really important with puppets is the fact that anything that you want to move independently, that's going to be a separate movement piece, probably should be carved out as a separate layer, okay, is the idea. Her legs are all, torso and legs are all one piece in here. I would want those separate pieces if I was going to move each independently, but it doesn't matter that much. I can still puppet these out. Let me show you how. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in this leg here. And I'm actually just going to erase. I'm just going to use the eraser tool here. And I'm just going to remove her legs entirely. Just completely clip them out. I actually clipped out a little bit of the dress there, but that's too bad. I'm just going to leave it that way. Again, I probably would do this a little more cleanly if I was doing this professionally, obviously. But then I've got the leg here. Okay, I can just stick this skeleton leg on here. Let me zoom out a little bit. Make sure it's within the actual range here. I'm just going to actually leave it. Why not? I'll leave the joint points of the skeletal leg there so we can look at them. I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to flip it horizontal and just move this over here so she's got 2 skeleton legs instead of regular legs. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is merge this back into her torso and leg section here. So when you modify a character, the really important part is that this naming convention, whatever the naming convention that was originally on the puppet, needs to stay there. Layer 1 copy and layer 1, if I bring it in like this into Character Animator isn't going to recognize those naming conventions. It works on proprietary naming conventions, and that's why you want to download a puppet for starters, is that those are already there, okay? So if I copy this name and I merge these together, okay, I need to make sure, again, if I merge them together, notice it renamed it layer 1 copy. I'm just going to paste the name torso and legs back on here, okay, and then I'm going to save it. Okay, just a Control S to save or Command S. So now I've saved this puppet. This is just a Photoshop puppet that I've gone in and done some modifications to, okay? And you can literally swap out, keep in mind, you can literally swap out everything in this puppet. You can make your custom puppet just by downloading this puppet file and swapping out all the layers and making sure the naming conventions stay the same. Okay, so that's the key to building a puppet, is just leaving it in all these pieces. And then just systematically save over the top of these pieces and rename the layers and hit save. So now I've got this Vicky mod puppet that I'm going to bring into Adobe Character Animator. So let me go ahead and pop open Character Animator here. So I've got a blank Character Animator project here. Remember, with Character Animator, you usually start in the home section over here, but I just did new project on that. So you just did new project, and it will start you out in this workflow. Okay, so this is my new project window. Remember, projects themselves work with scenes, just like with After Effects. You have to have actual scenes in there. So you do new scene, okay, and that will drop a scene inside here. Okay, so you need the scene before you import the puppet is the idea. So I've got a new project, I've got a new scene, and I'm going to double click in here or go to File, Import, or drag and drop. It doesn't matter. I could even drag and drop. If I find my Vicky mod PSD, just the Photoshop file, the plain old PSD file, drop that Photoshop file into Character Animator. And what it's going to do by default, now this Vicky mod needs to be this puppet. It's recognized it as a puppet, the PSD file, because it comes in with this little icon. I need to pop this puppet into my scene. So you just drag and drop. There we go. Now, look what happens automatically. Now, I haven't even set my rest pose or anything like that. And because it's got all the component pieces, Adobe Character Animator automatically recognizes all these bits. So remember what I was saying last time. Again, the owl up here is a little wonky. If I can point the correct direction. My screen is actually backwards, which is weird on the owl. So up here, this top half of the owl isn't normally there. And so this makes my rest pose a little weird with the 360 camera. So I'm just going to try and smush my face in here as best I can to have it catch my rest pose. And I'm going to take off my glasses, obviously. If you wear glasses, take your glasses off because it doesn't work with that. Set rest pose. And now, again, it's cued into my eyes. Now the eyes will follow my eye tracking, eyebrows and things like that are all working. So the facial features of the puppet are working, right? And it's tracking along with my dialogue as I'm talking. But she's floating around. Like if I move around, notice she just kind of zips around the screen and her arms don't move. I can't click and move her arms around or anything like that. So I need to rig the puppet. So once you've placed the puppet, unless it's been pre-rigged, you've got to rig it. And this is a lot like 3D, kind of like 3D character animation, rigging in 3D, but a lot simpler. So what you do, once your puppet's been popped into this working environment, you can go over to the rig section. So up top, again, you've got your home button, rig, record, and stream. If you click rig, it brings you into the rig palette. So the rigging palette over here has all of our layers from Photoshop. And if you notice the pluses, I mentioned this last week, the pluses, anything we had tagged with a plus in Photoshop. So here's my Photoshop file. Anything tagged with a plus on here, plus ponytail, plus arm 1, plus arm 2, comes in as an independent piece. This little crown piece here, if you roll over this, indicates, it even tells you it's part of a group, right? But this is again an independent piece, the piece of the crown here. So the arms are independent, the ponytails are independent, the eyebrows are independent, all that stuff can move independently of the body. But the reason that the body moves and floats around, the arms are all kind of like wonky, is because I haven't rigged any bones in this thing. So what I got to do is rig up the actual bone structure of my character so I can actually use this for animation. So the first thing I'm going to do, the head actually looks pretty good for the most part, but I could click on the head and look through some of this stuff. There's the mouth portion, the head itself. Again, this is fine. It was moving just fine along with my mocap, so I'm going to ignore that. And really, the body is the important part. The body's mostly what you have to rig up. So what I've got going on now with the body is there are no bones in this body. Obviously, it looks like there's bones because I stuck little skeleton legs on here, but those aren't the bones that we work with for animating. So all the tools in this bin are down here along the bottom. These are your tools you're going to work with to rig your character. There's not a whole lot of stuff down here. This is a mesh. This previews the mesh on your character. You can actually see the mesh on the character if you want to see that. This is just like the puppet warp tool that I showed you guys in Adobe After Effects. It actually takes the mesh and creates like a really tessellated mesh you can adapt. I'm going to turn that off though because I don't really need to see that. I just want to see the outline of it. So the outline's helpful because it lets you see what you've got selected here. Right-hand side over here is just properties. Properties and tags. These tags are going to come in handy here in a minute. This is the suggested skeletal structure of my character. It actually has some AI built in here that wants to recognize this stuff for me. I'm going to use that in a minute. All right. Now, here's some kind of the hand way of doing it. First thing I'm going to do is click my selection tool. Again, just basic selection tool, V on your keyboard, and make sure my body is selected. And it says body on there, so we're selected. Down here along the bottom, though, there's a couple of different tool handles that are actually really important. This tool that looks like a little target is a handle tool. This handle tool is generally what you'll use to move your puppet around. Now, remember last week where I was moving the puppet's arms around and recording that while I was talking? That's a handle. And there's three different types of handles. There's regular standard handles. There are pins, which are static handles, which I'm going to need in a minute. And there are grabbable handles, which lets you actually, the dragger tool lets you place a handle that is meant to be moved. Like her arms. Her arms I'm going to move around and articulate here in a minute. And that's the handle I'll use for that. The stuck pin, the pin tool itself, is for sticking things in place, like her body. I don't want her body to be floating around the canvas when I'm talking. So I'm going to take this pin tool and I'm going to pin a pin right in the middle of her body. Now, I'm going to pin it right at her waist because if I wanted to bend later on, I could have that be an articulation bending. Any place you put a pin, it can be a movable point, okay? When I click that, right out of the gate, look over here, stuff changed. So what this is saying is the modifiers, this is a fixed point. I can change it to a draggable point, but I want her body to be fixed. I don't want her body floating around and stuff like that. So I've just pinned her body into place. I would also like to pin the feet as well. I can make these, I'm just going to go ahead and pin them with plain old fixed pins for now. So I placed 3 pins in the character now. I'm going to go ahead and go pop right back out to the record section. So I just popped in these regular pins, go out to the record section. And now look what happens. At least we're part of the way there, right? So I've got the body itself, right? Since I pinned it at the waist, can follow my head a lot more closely. It actually mirrors my motions a lot more closely in the mocap. Now the arms still aren't rigged. So if I bend, then the arms, oops, she just kind of freaked out here. Sometimes if you go past the limits, it kind of spazzes out and you got to reset. But the arms haven't been pinned, but the legs are pretty good. So let me go ahead and go back into rig, and we're going to work on it a little further. Now the feet are fixed, that's fine. I'm going to come back to these later. The head's actually pretty good. I like the way her body moves around and stuff like that, so I'm going to leave that there. I could put one more pin here in the neck if I wanted to make her body a little more rigid, but I'm going to leave it that way for now. Let's move on to the arms. This is really the more important part. So when I click on the arms, when you click on something by default, and I'm going to go to my selection tool, I have the arm layer selected. By default, each layer itself has an origin point. It's like where the layer transforms from is in the center. That doesn't make sense for an arm, right? Your arm doesn't pivot at the center. Your arm pivots at the shoulder. So when you first select the layer, what you need to do is move the pivot point of that layer where it's supposed to go right out of the gate. Same thing with the second arm. If I select that, the pivot point's all wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and move the pivot point up to her shoulder so that it pivots at the shoulder for starters. So that's the first thing you do is just select the green point that shows up in here, the anchor point, and move it to the correct spot. Now what I'm going to do, back to my regular pin, my fixed pins. Her shoulder is not supposed to move, right? Like, again, they're floating off of the body before. I don't want that. I'm going to pin this shoulder to the body so it stays fixed to the body. Now, I'm going to go ahead and leave the other arm the way it is and come back to that one in a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and do some more pins. Second pins that you want to use, dragger tool. Dragger tool is the functional pins that you use to actually move the character. So what I'm going to do is at each joint point of the character, I put a fixed pin up here. I'm going to click, okay, and it sets a draggable point, right? This says draggable point. Now this is at the wrist and at the elbow. Now, if I go right back out to record, I'm not even going to verify any of this stuff. When I go back out to record, my character is back up and running. But look, check it out. The arms are now pinned to the character. They're not floating around when I'm moving my character around, right? And now this right arm, I can even go through and move. Now there's some issues. It's like Laffy Taffy. It's pretty freaky, but I can move the elbow and I could wave. I could do a little wave here and I could stretch the arm way out if I want. I don't necessarily want to do that, and I'm gonna fix that in a minute. But at least we know the arm's got some articulation in it. Okay, now the arm's movable. What this is called an IK system, an inverse kinematic system I'm going to set up here in a minute. There's going to be some things I'm going to set up in a second that are going to allow us to move this character a little more effectively. So let me go back into rig. All right, so I've gone ahead and added these points, but this is not necessarily the end of what we need to do here. So these draggable points, I've got the elbow point selected on my character. But if you look over here, oops, I accidentally clicked that. I'm going to Control Z that back, Command Z that back. If you look over here on this little character setup, the properties panel, what we've got here are some suggested joint points. This is how you would rig a character in 3D and the way you would rig it on 2D as well. These are all the joint points that you would want to articulate and move your character: elbow, wrist, hips, knees, ankle, etc., etc. This is set up to be intelligent. So it knows if you're placing a point, here at the elbow, there are preset behaviors for this stuff. Inverse kinematics. Currently, I'm going to go ahead and do something real quick here. I'm going to go back out to record. Currently, as we saw, the arms move like noodles. If I move the wrist, the elbow kind of moves and kind of stays in place, but it's all kind of spaghetti and weird. So if I go back in to my rig and I select these points that correspond to the points over here and click them, if I click right elbow, notice what happens. It is now tagged draggable, but it has the behavior of right elbow tagged on it. I'm going to do this again to the wrist. Click the wrist, wrist, shoulder, shoulder. And it tags all these points out. Now if I go back out to the record section and I start moving this character around a little bit, the arms move a little bit better. Now notice as I'm moving the wrist, the elbow moves along with it. Before, when I moved the wrist, it was just the wrist moving. Now the arm bends. Now it's still noodly, and I need to fix that. It's all rubbery. We can whip it around in circles. But at least it's following the way a normal person's arm would work. If you grab someone's wrist and push their wrist, their elbow follows it. That is inverse kinematics. The other wrist is set up to be forward kinematics, which is a different thing entirely. So by clicking these joint points in here and making these joint points correspond to the actual things on the character, you have a better animation already pre-rigged and set up. One little other thing in here, the noodle arm. I got to fix that noodle arm business because the floppy arm is freaking me out. So I'm gonna fix that real quick. Here's what you want to do. This tool down here in your tool bin, the stick tool. Stick tool lets you add line to specify where a puppet mesh shouldn't bend. So if your character is all warbly and weird, you can click this stick tool down here on the bottom, right down here, and you go between, okay? You go between the joints. I start, now don't click on the actual joint point because it'll screw up. Go between it, see where the icon changes a little bit. Go right after the joint, click and drag up until the next joint and let go. And it creates a bone. This is basically a bone in here. I'm gonna click on the next one, click and drag, bingo. Okay, so I've got two sticks shoved in between these 2 points here. So now when I go back out to my record, we should have a much more fluid arm. Ah, look at that. Look at that. Much less noodly. I can move our arm around in ways that make more sense. I can move the elbow independently. So we can do a lot more now. Now, it's still going to be a little weird if you take it past the bounds of normality, right? That's just up to you as the animator. But at least the thing is moving more correctly. And now as I move the body around, look at that. As I'm moving around and it's trying to follow me, that elbow stays in place, right? That's the IK. That's the inverse kinematics happening there, is that the elbow point has bones in it, and we can leave it fixed to a certain spot, and it adds to our animation, right? So I can stand here like this and it'll follow. Pretty cool. Those bones are really useful. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the legs here to show you a little bit more of this. But I mean, really, this is it as far as the process goes. Let me go ahead and rig. I'll do it a lot faster. I'm going to rig the right arm. So here's the right arm. Again, what you want to do, go in, place in your fixed point at the shoulder, right? Go in and place draggable points at the elbow and at the wrist if you so choose inside there. Select those points with your selection tool. Go over to the corresponding points on the properties panel and tag them. Tag that as elbow. Tag this as wrist. Bingo. Okay, there we go. Then I'm going to go in with the bones tool, or the stick tool. I'm defaulting to 3D language. Sorry about that. Draw in the bone there, draw in another one between there, blammo. Okay, let me go ahead and go down to the legs. Now the torso and legs are a little different because they're not independent layers, but that doesn't mean anything. Okay, so the cool thing about this is all just one mesh anyway. The legs are still attached to the body, but that doesn't really make any difference. So if I go to torso and legs, I'm just going to pin it up. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and place in points. Again, I'm going to keep the feet fixed. Maybe I don't want the feet fixed. Here's kind of a cool thing. If you've placed a fixed point, you can always swap it to draggable later. You can always remove the fixed out of here. Notice it stacked both of those in there. You can always get rid of a property in here. It's not absolute. Okay, so let me go ahead and pop another draggable in there. Draggable, draggable. Here at the hips, I probably would want some fixed points. So I'm going to go ahead and add in some fixed points. And then I'm going to do the bones. The same thing with the bones here in the legs. I'm going to drag a bone between each node. Oops, accidentally moved the node. Be careful that you don't do that. That would definitely compromise my character. But now what we've got, if we go back over to the record, now that I've rigged up the bones and the pins inside this thing, now I've got a character who's much more articulated. I should be able to grab these arms and do all kinds of motions. I can grab her feet. Now the mesh is a little off here. Okay, that was my bad. I pinned the foot a little bit too high. So the feet, it's also a fixed point too, is what I initially had in here. But there we go. Now the character is movable. She's articulated. I can do a lot more motions. I can move up and down. I can, again, lots more motion than I had originally with this character just by adding these points in. Now, the thing is, you don't have to stick to those traditional joint points and things like that. You can add as many as you want. If you have characters like a woolly worm, something that would be articulated, that could move around, you can customize this kind of however you want is the idea. But that's the process. That's the rigging process. Now, yes, there's a lot more to it than this, but that's the basics of it. That will help you get by. What I would suggest as far as workflow goes, though, so that's the rigging process. We're done with that. But just I want to overview some basic like workflow kind of stuff. So the workflow that you've got inside Character Animator here, what it's designed to do is take your character from Character Animator and put it into Adobe After Effects, right? That's the whole idea there is you want this thing imported into After Effects so that whenever you go to animate it, it's basically set to go is the idea. So you do all your recording and things of that nature in Character Animator. You say your lines and your dialogue in Character Animator here. And then once you're done with your dialogue, each scene, and I would encourage you to do each scene of dialogue separately. Start a new scene, record out your dialogue, save it, okay? So once you've saved it, let's just say we're going to record some dialogue and save this thing out, right? So I'm just going to do a simple record. Remember, all you got to do is hit the record button down here. And I've already set my res pose, my face, and things like that. I'm doing just the basic recording to show you, just some of the motions and things like that, and how we bring this character into After Effects. And we're going to work that pipeline next. We're going to spin the arm around a little bit. She's looking kind of crazy here at the legs and stuff. But that's plenty. All right, so let's go ahead and hit stop on that. Rewind. Res pose, my face, and things like that. I'm doing just the basic recording. Okay, so the recording worked, right? We know that. Save. Now, one nice thing about Character Animator that I didn't mention last time, that is, I really wish all of Adobe programs had, and hopefully they eventually will, is it saves automatically. The project's up here, it says save project, always saved. Theoretically, this thing should be saving constantly in the background while you're working on it. So this project has been saved. Now it saves it to my documents. I haven't saved it out to a different location. So I'm going to pull that into After Effects from my documents. All you got to do, it's really slick. You just fire up Adobe After Effects. So I've got my Adobe After Effects workflow fired up here. Okay, just the basic setup that we would have normally. I have started, remember you have to do a new composition. Okay, anytime you got a new project, you have to do a new composition. So new composition, and again, whatever size you're looking for, I'm just going to stick with the default HD. Okay, there's my new comp. What you do is you just import. File, import, or double click on the project bin down here. And I've got to find my Character Animator project. Now mine's in Documents, Adobe, Character Animator, and then all my Character Animator projects are in there. Like Character Animator 4 is the one I just came up with. This comes up as a CHPROJ file. That's your working Character Animator file. You want to just single click this thing. Now you can automatically create a composition with this if you want to. If you want it based on the character size, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I don't even need this first comp I made because it has a create comp option in here. I'm going to click open. Now it's going to ask you, which scene do you want to import? Now I'm going to hit cancel for a second here just to show you what this is doing. I'm going to go back to the one I did last week that I had a bunch of little scenes in, project 3, and I'm going to hit open on that. Remember, I set up like 4 different characters in there. I set up the Dr. Applesmith and the little wizard and that pickle character, and then I modified the wizard character. Each one of these scenes in that project you can import, right? So this is exactly what I was talking about a minute ago when I was saying what you want to do in this project is do your dialogue, get your dialogue all mapped out inside Character Animator, do it in scenes, and then those scenes you can import directly into After Effects and lay in your backgrounds, your foregrounds, and your effects and text on top of it. So like, for instance, I'm going to hit cancel on this again, and I'm just going to import the one I did today. So we're working on the correct one. 4, open, again, create composition. Scene 1, which is the only one I have, click OK. And it should bring this thing in. Now it's going to ask me, we want desktop link? Okay, I want to allow it access to my stuff. And there we go. There's my character with a transparent background. Right, so I just went ahead and dropped in. I went and grabbed just a real basic background here. I was going to use Dr. Applesmith, but I ended up switching to this Vicky character. This scene is comp 1 with my character. Oops, scene 1. I can drop in stuff. There we go. Right now, my character is in a background. The whole thing, pose my face and things like that. I'm doing just the basic recording to show you, just some of the motions and things like that, and how we bring this character into After Effects. And we're going to work that pipeline next. We're going to spin the arm around a little bit. She's looking kind of crazy here with the legs and stuff. But that's plenty. All right, so let's go. See there? So that's, again, how easy this is. Really, Character Animator, the hard part about this process is the rigging portion. Trying to get a character that's rigged properly and set up if you want to custom my face and things. I want that to repeat over and over again. But the hard part's the rigging of the character. The animation portion's all mocap for the most part, and you just moving the character around. Oh, her arm went crazy over there. Moving the character around and stuff like that. The integration into After Effects is very, very easy. All you do is import the thing, and then you do everything around it. Now this works just like anything else in After Effects is the idea. Now, theoretically, this thing is live link. So for instance, if I would do something in here to my scene, and I would want to re-edit or re-record something in my scene here. Let's say I just record over this. How we bring this character into After Effects. And I really accidentally grabbed the leg here. That pipeline next. We're going to spin the arm around a little bit. She's looking kind of crazy here with the legs and stuff. That's plenty. All right, so now I just re-recorded some motions from my character's hands, right? So the dialogue, I went back into Character Animator and just went back over my recording, hit record again, and re-recorded some stuff, right? In theory, if this is working properly, this stuff should translate. Oh, there we go. Check it out. Here's the new hand motions I just did in Adobe Character Animator. They have live linked into After Effects like that, and how we bring the character into After Effects. And I really accidentally grabbed that. Now mine is doing some crazy echo because I was talking over it as I was doing my recording. That's not advisable, right? If you're going to go back in and re-edit some animation, you want to shut up basically, so you're not recording over the top of what you did before and have that weird echo, or delete your original audio track and start over. Regardless, the point is it's linked, right? So now the thing is linked in After Effects, and no matter what you do in Character Animator, it's going to bring that stuff back into After Effects live. So if you screwed something up, you can go back in and tweak it. It's pretty slick.